So let's ruminate and dissertate on the commonalities and differences between conspiracism and nihilism. Conspiracism is a general worldview that sees history as driven primarily by interwoven webs of secret conspiracies. Within conspiracism, there are conspiracy theories, which are leaner narratives, more specific and more limited in scope. A conspiracy theory often alleges that a secret plot involving hidden actors is behind particular historical events. And so I'm glad that we have finally come to address this particular subject, as it is a symptom of an insidious, pervasive spiritual sickness that has come to infect the minds of modern men. It is a dangerous addiction to get involved in, and its propagation represents a profound malevolent misdirection, which further ensures even deeper misdirection through the interaction and consumption of it. But before we delve deeper into that, let us first ask, how is conspiracism related to nihilism? It is related to nihilism in a dark sense, that is, with the most commonly understood interpretation of nihilism, a type of misanthropic philosophy with a negative implication. And before any of you object, I'm not saying this about conspiracism because people believe that this is true. I'm saying this because I already know people don't believe it's true. And I am here to tell you that no, you are wrong. It is most certainly true. Conspiracism is profoundly nihilistic because it negates many vital components of your existential being. The main one being the basic innate unconscious trust of the context of your experience. Therein, anxiety, paranoia, and delusions ineluctably follow. It's the type of negation that renders an existential explorer dysfunctional and eventually completely defunct, as they are no longer able to learn or unlearn, as paranoid suspicion negates the value of all existential applications, good and bad. So the truth gets grouped in with all the lies, and the baby ends up getting thrown out with the bathwater, resulting in a deep mire down a slippery slope, dead-end swallowing pit of quicksand. This is what conspiracism ultimately culminates into. It may start small, with just a few minor theories about isolated events, but if followed further and given more time, energy, and focus, it will inevitably start to have an accumulative effect, eventually snowballing into a full-blown detrimental mindset. Note that the word mental is in the word detrimental. It is indeed specifically detrimental, as illusory appearances within sensory perception are all mental in nature. So, this is a contagious infectious disease of the mind, a dis-ease of the mind. And for so long as a mind is not at ease, a mastery of mind can never be realized. Distrust is like a ruthless fire that spreads further and further, raging out of control, consuming anything and everything in its path. And while this circumstance is indeed disconcerting, distrust isn't the real foundation of the problem, as distrust is only a sign of a much deeper issue. So running around trying to put out the flames of the ruthless fire is addressing the wrong area of concern, as distrust itself is only an indication of a sickness with a much deeper root cause. Distrust isn't the source of power fueling negative manifestations. It is only one of the many symptoms. What gives rise to the distrust lures a consciousness towards conspiracism in the first place is fear. Fear is resistance, and resistance is the friction that causes the spark that produces the flames of the fire that burns and destroys everything. Fear is the antithesis of a calm mind, and without a calm mind, true nature cannot be realized. The key to solving this existential quandary is in letting go and allowing the mind the peace and serenity necessary to recognize its true nature. This is done by shifting the focus of attention away from the appearances of sense perception and instead focusing it onto the source of the attention itself. To get caught up in the reflected details of the five senses is to lose clarity of their source. And losing the clarity of their source is what creates the delusional ignorance that wrongly identifies perceptibles as separated objects to be desired or feared. This is why you can't fake it until you make it. Enlightenment isn't attained, or something that happens to a character. This is why whether or not you are actually awake isn't an ambiguous discernment to make by the truly wise. It's obvious and able to be determined within minutes, usually upon the opening of your mouth. The second you point outwards towards the field of perceptibles with attributions, it is already known that you are deluded, and there are no yeah but what abouts, as many of you may feel inclined to implore. Understanding that everything that appears in the field of perception is mental phenomena means that there isn't anything that is an exception. Paranormal phenomena isn't an exception. Divine phenomena isn't an exception. There simply are no phenomenal aspects of experience that are exceptions. And this is why conspiracy theory is so particularly treacherous. And the agents who herald the message are so particularly malignant. Nothing serves the agenda of evil more efficiently than pointing at the details of sensory information and entreating people to get caught up in it. And boy, do people get caught up in it, with the religious always seeming to be the first in line. Theists are the best-known faction to get caught up in conspiracy, as modern-day society has become the embodiment of Satanism for them, which just goes to show that religion has always been the original mother of all conspiracy theories, replete with fantastical mystical narratives, doomsday prophecies, and epic battles against agendas of deception and corruption, serving as much of the meat of its myths. But we also see it in other groups too, usually with interests in politics, social activism, paranormal investigation, and the New Age movement. Fields of intrigue that have natural inclinations towards the analysis of truth and falsehood, and an assumed advocacy of moral righteousness. These types of people are the most susceptible to the lure of conspiracism, many of whom are of good intentions. But you know what they say. Just ask the theist. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Ooh, sounds like a conspiracy. But seriously, if you want to be taken seriously, you need to let go of the conspiracy mongering. As to even be involved with it discredits your legitimacy. But that's part of the conspiracy, isn't it? It's just what the shadow agenda wants. To discredit all conspiracy theory as a domain of crooks and nut jobs, right? Well, you've done a good job of this all by yourself. Entertaining absurd, far-fetched notions concerning such things as lizard people, flat planets, and the evils of science and technology, whose forbidden inquiries have given rise to quantum fluctuations that change things in reality, seemingly with an exclusive penchant for altering the speller and grammar of pop culture art and commercial products. Yeah. So the shadow agenda doesn't need to do anything, as you discredit yourself with so much of this nonsense. But I know what you are thinking, and I don't want any of you to get the wrong idea, as this seems to suggest that there are dependable conspiracies and unreliable conspiracies, and that one needs only to discern between those that are true and those that are false. But this is another layer of deception, as there are no conspiracies that warrant your attention. I say this with the most emphasis to the New Agers, whose motives often seem to waver back and forth between spirituality and conspiracism. This is a dangerous fence to straddle, as it is in a position with an interest in the truth. If you want to concern yourself in the affairs of the world of men, then drop spirituality and go back to politics or social activism, as true spirituality has no place for conspiracy theory or any other kind of ideology whose purposes are aimed at making changes to the surfaces of illusions. And by the way, in case you didn't get the latest conspiracy theory memo, things like enlightenment, detachment, Eastern philosophy, DMT, and the pineal gland are now officially a part of the conspiracy theory canon, as they have been identified as components of the nefarious agenda. That's right. But it makes sense, doesn't it? Illumination. Illuminati. So this must mean that enlightenment is evil. The opportunity to gain a clarity of mind that is able to discern between the truth of awareness and the lie of illusory perceivables is to be avoided at all costs. Instead, just focus on the face value of the perceivables. Yeah, never mind the truth. It's evil. Just keep focusing on the distractions. Everyone knows this. Just ask Alex Jones, a man who never met a conspiracy theory he didn't like. He'll get you facing in the wrong direction fast enough. Ergo, getting back to the original point leveled at the New Ager, It's a disservice to be speaking about enlightenment and conspiracy theory within the same teachings, as they contradict each other and are wholly incompatible. The truth is found by looking within, not by looking without. Focusing on illusion begets delusion, while focusing on awareness fosters clarity of mind. I know that evil, corruption, and injustice are hard baits to pass up existentially, but you must remain vigilant in the mastery of your mind, lest you fall prey to the seduction of illusion. A nightmare is never overcome by breathing more life into it via validation through fear, resistance, and macro focus on its details. This approach only bolsters and sustains the nightmare. A nightmare is overcome through detachment, brave abandon, and redirecting the focus of attention towards the source of the nightmare, which reveals these negative manifestations to be projections of the mind. This is called lucidity, a mental state of clarity that dissipates all nightmares. So if you fancy yourself a so-called truther, or as some kind of champion of ethics and honor, then you will stop enabling falsehoods, as that's all you're doing with conspiracy theory. This is something conspiracy theorists should really consider, as most of you are perpetuating evil unintentionally and are fostering a lie with the false notion that you are somehow blazing a trail of truth and righteousness, unaware that the actual underlying conspiracy beneath all conspiracies is the use of conspiracy itself to cause distraction, foster wickedness, and discredit authentic avenues to the truth of existence. And this is important to understand, as once this surreptitious disposition takes root in the mind, it renders the adherent virtually worthless and moves them beyond the point of all possible reclamation. For what good is a so-called truth seeker if they can't tell the difference between a truth and a lie? What good is a so-called truth seeker if they can't even tell the difference between the tools of liberation and the tools of slavery? Of what use is a person to the truth if they are forever paranoid, trustful of nothing, and suspicious of every little thing, no matter how trivial? It's the type of mindset that cannot learn anything new, as any new information has to be skewed to fit the conspiracy narrative. And it also cannot unlearn, which is a crucial element of awakening, now completely inaccessible to the conspiracist due to the stupidity of his own blind obstinance. It's one thing to be skeptical, but once you start becoming so extremely distrustful that you begin to condemn even the things that can free your mind, you have moved beyond being skeptical and have become an impediment to the truth and an agent of disservice. So verily I say unto you, pull the plug on conspiracy theory. Negate it. And this shouldn't be too hard, as if you are a conspiracist, then you are already a nihilist, as you have negated many of the salient facets of your existential being. So, since you are already proficient in negating aspects, why not employ nihilism in a positive application and use it to detach from that which is false, thereby creating the proper conditions to facilitate intimacy with what is true. And I know, after everything I've just said, some of you will be saying, yes, of course the Metasage is asking me to abandon conspiracism because he's part of the conspiracy. He's just an agent of the evil agenda. Right? You're never going to be able to move forward until you negotiate this hurdle. If you ever do, I'll be waiting. And so, until then, I leave you with this. So many of the great warriors among us never even get a chance to train and master their minds because they are far too busy trying to fight evil and save the world. Hang up the spandex. Don't waste time trying to be a hero for illusion. Realize awareness, and then everything else will fall into place.